Hello and welcome back, and today of all days I want to talk about the things that I love about NAS, but I also want to talk about the things I do not love about NAS. And in today's video I'm going to describe the 5 things about NAS that I love more than anything, the things about the subject that are the reason for this channel, and the 5 things about NAS that I just wish didn't exist or could be changed. But it's worth highlighting that most of the things I'm going to talk about today do not apply to any one brand, but the overall arching subject of NAS and all of the brands together. And when it comes to the things I don't like, they're going to be things that are potentially unsolvable, but they are just things about network attached storage that really wind me up. So why don't we get ourselves comfortable, grab a little glass of something and start going through the things we like. Run that intro. Now, this first thing about NAS that I love is something that has grown over the last few years, and that is no longer NAS being a kind of beat the cloud. There was a time when network attached storage was existing as an alternative to the cloud, but in recent years it's become abundantly clear that it's not a if we can't beat them, join them scenario so much as it is NAS becoming a platform that you can use with cloud, with Dropbox, with Google Drive, with all of those different cloud platforms. As convenient as they are, it has to be said that they have their own downsides that NAS can support, and at the same time there is a level of convenience and access made available to you with third-party clouds that is just not as straightforward on NAS. And in the last 4 to 5 years what we've seen is like one little like paraphrase little thing put together on every presentation: on-prem, on premises, otherwise known as bare metal, on in-house servers designed to work in conjunction with cloud, thereby giving a lot of users the ease, setup and access of these big third-party clouds that they may already have those subscriptions, but also integrating NAS in and giving users the ability to have both platforms. It's no longer a case of rubbishing cloud and getting a NAS, or going for cloud because it's better than NAS. Now we're in a field of play in this industry where these two platforms are intertwined and integrated in terms of backup, in terms of synchronization, and the benefits of both being advertised parallel and not being done in a kind of one-upsmanship style. And I really love that about this growing industry now. Next up, storage capacity. As good as clouds can be, and that integration I mentioned, one of the most appealing things about NAS is with every passing year, the sheer scale of storage afforded to a user, even on modest level systems, is just frankly insane in its quantity and evolution. To put it into perspective, I remember a decade ago getting super excited about the very concept of a 4 terabyte drive. That seemed insane to me, yet not a few days ago I was able to review a 20 terabyte drive. 2 drives, same scale, 20, 5 times the capacity of that drive there, and with hopes and roadmaps being published by these brands to hit 50 terabyte drives by the end of the decade. The idea that network attached storage devices are almost certainly going to at the same time allow you access to that level of storage, and the very idea that at the end of the decade you could have a 4-bay NAS, if NAS is a thing still, that could be a 200 terabyte on a 4-bay system is frankly insane to me. And the idea that cloud storage providers, what they're charging for single terabyte spaces, just for me still makes NAS just a wonderful platform in terms of sheer storage capacity, and something that only gets better every single year. Next up, the evolution of NAS over the years, and I don't just mean the last few decades, I mean as little as the last 5 to 6 years. The way NAS has fleshed itself out as like a purchasable item is fantastic. I remember in the days of old, again, go back all that time, even 10 to 20 years, there was a point when servers, when you bought one, you kind of, the range of choice and the selections are made available to you weren't really that broad. You had your bay numbers, but the sheer scale and range of what you could buy, and when you had your investment amount of money and what you were going to put it towards, capacity, power, bandwidth, whatever, was quite limited. And fast forward to now, not only do you have tremendous scales of solutions available to you, for this 12 bay desktop solutions, and even rack mounts as low as a 2 bay rack mount. What is that, RS217? Yes, I remember. Just the sheer range and scope of solutions in the market to tailor different users is just phenomenal. And then you look at the different kinds of software out there, you look at the different types of installation. We talked about it before, with either buying an off-the-shelf turnkey solution or going open source, build your own. Even companies like IX Systems that produce pre-made turnkey solutions with true NAS on board, or build it your own. We talked about it with Kickstarter last week with that store access system, and that's just the tipping point for a lot of systems. The sheer range and scope of NAS to allow a user with their budget to still, even with a modest sum, be able to direct it in a different direction of what they need in terms of hardware, software, capacity and support is really impressive for an industry that a couple of decades ago was so rudimentary by comparison. And bringing that spotlight on evolution of the NAS industry over this time, we've really got to do a big focus on that software, because anyone that's worked in not just data storage but definitely the network industry, and definitely people that have worked on like routers and switches and network management, old Cisco, late IBM, stuff like that, you'll know that the graphical user interfaces you had to use were at best clear but difficult, and at worst absolutely insane to try and understand and configure and work with in any kind of reasonable way without a substantial steep learning curve. Fast forward to now, and not only do all of the typical NAS brands that I talk about, the off-the-shelf ones, have their own dedicated software that in many regards is comparable to a complete operating system like Windows, but on top of that, we have mobile applications to allow tailored access, desktop client applications, and once again, as mentioned in my first point there, integration with existing platforms in such a meaningful way, such as integrating with Mac OS for a lot of their in-house systems and software services, integration with Windows tools, and certification and collaboration with those results in software that is just phenomenal in its quality level. But of course, it doesn't just limit to those. Even the open source platforms, your Unraid, your TrueNAS, all of these things, even down to network management, all of these tools have become incredibly user-friendly compared to what they were before. And none of that would have been possible without continued investment and engagement in this kind of technology, which is phenomenally brilliant when you look at, a couple of decades ago when it was considered high-tech, IT admin only level software and services. And stepping back from those high-end IT service system admin things, let's talk about multimedia, because the desirability of having your own NAS compared with streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, those monthly subscription services that give you access, frankly, to a lot of media, a lot of which you might not own, but effectively still rented, and at the end of every few years, you don't have anything to show for it. Having a NAS that not only allows you to have all of that multimedia that you have collected through one means or another for decades, all in one place to be streamed all around your house, devices and remotely, but on top of that, giving you access to all of that and using tools like Plex Media Server, like Emby, like Jellyfin, like Twonky, like Kodi, all of these apps to allow you to enjoy this with scraped metadata and databases online from all of these free services to do all of the box art, the reviews, trailers, cast listings, add-on information, extra content, and all presented in beautiful graphical user interfaces from the comfort of your sofa. The idea that NAS has evolved into not only competition against those streaming services, but in recent years with rising costs in streaming services, actually more viable financially within 3 to 5 years, and you get to keep the hardware, just makes it ever more impressive to me that NAS has evolved in this way. But for all of my love of network attached storage, it ain't perfect, and there are times it breaks this man's heart. So now I want to go through the things about NAS that if I don't hate, I just, they burn me. Let's go. For all of my lovely words, I swear to God, there isn't a single NAS brand that has got the whole licensing thing down right. And it really winds me up that a lot of the NAS brands, you pay, as little as 200 to 300 nicker, or you're going to spend thousands of pounds, and then you find out some services have licenses behind them, and you have a limited amount of use before you've got to go license. Now, obviously, one of the biggest examples and most commonly hit upon examples of this is things like surveillance, with surveillance camera licenses, with almost no consistency across all the different NAS brands, with the number of default ones you get, the cost of adding on licenses, the lifespan of those licenses, and the level of access that those licenses grant you across all of the different NAS brands. Now, I get it. There is no real easy solution here, because a different person who buys one NAS solution for their home and light level backups and a couple of cameras is not that same user that's got 10 members of staff, 2 sites, a bunch of cameras, insurance hinging on it, and the safety and well-being of their business and staff. I get it. But still, right now, there seems to be little to no smoothness or consistency across this licensing, and that's just surveillance. The minute you move into other areas to do with synchronizing with third-party platforms, running some of the premium cloud level services of some NAS brands there, the whole licensing thing has never really been ironed out to a satisfactory level for everyone. As I mentioned in the intro, maybe there isn't an answer, and maybe there will always be this inconsistency and incongruous nature of presenting these things with regards to marketing a product and still having these services for people that are going to expand within them while simultaneously subsidizing those services. Just because there isn't a smooth solution doesn't mean it doesn't annoy anyway. And talking of non-solvable problems that still nonetheless persist, it's got to be, if you are a new kind of person into the world of network attached storage, there is still, to my mind, no perfect solution for anyone. And any NAS solution arrives with an element of compromise. Now, that compromise can come down to the price point and the value of what you're getting, even though you might be getting a big device that's got loads of software. It could come down to the power of the device, where you're looking for a device that can do a lot of stuff, doesn't cost as much, but you find out the actual hardware power is too low. The software of the device that may be incredibly user-friendly, but does that by being a lot more limited in what you can change within it, or is a complete open book, but unfortunately then is incredibly complex and prone to the odd inconsistency. And finally, flexibility within a platform, and that flexibility can extend to support third-party services, to support third-party hardware, and just generally, to my mind, even on this channel when I talk about NAS and ones that I like and I don't, there is still to date no one perfect solution for anyone. Again, this is probably an unsolvable solution, but it still doesn't, it doesn't detract from the point that it's really annoying that there isn't any solution that is a 10 out of 10, all boxes ticked solution for everyone. This next one is way more specific, and it's to do with memory compatibility, because although these are first-party solutions that have been developed by all of these brands, and this is the sort of thing that I'm sure the brands watching this will not like to hear, but the whole memory compatibility thing, man, that winds me up. I get it. You want to make sure that some hardware is tested, and to make sure that hardware being used in your systems means that it can still perform and do the things that you advertise that you say it can do. But this whole idea of memory, own brand, branded memory, and this goes across pretty much all the brands, right the way down to TerraMaster as well, brands that produce their own memory, which is third-party memory that they have labelled, and I'm sure they've tested. The idea that there are sometimes scenarios where you use third-party memory, even the same memory that they are using, but not the label on there that is that brand, and then it comes up with a notice that says you're using unsupported, uncompatible memory, and warning, warning, warning. That winds me up, because I get it. You are going for a turnkey solution. You didn't go open source. You didn't go DIY. Fine. But don't say to me I can't use memory that I know works. Yes, if I use some third-party hit memory by a company that's been in business for a month and folded a month later, and that memory's got sparks coming out of it, fine. But if I'm using Samsung, Kingston, Crucial, Sabren, names that have existed in this market for quite a long time, associated with NAND and memory modules, don't tell me I can't use them, because it just annoys me. And talking of hardware that can annoy, I think a lot of us can agree that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the range of CPUs used on NAS really wind us up. Now, this can be for a myriad of different reasons. There are some users that will get annoyed that a CPU is really underpowered, but it's a low price NAS anyway, so give and take, give and take. Other users that will look at a CPU, such as recently with non-integrated graphic CPUs being utilized in systems where generally the marketplace enjoys integrated memory CPUs, that being absent annoys people. And then you have CPUs that are generally very powerful, such as, we've seen Intel Core CPUs being used, but at the same time, although I really like those CPUs, and in some cases more so than comparative server grade Xeons, you can't get them in smaller scale devices, and you can only get those CPUs in powerhouse devices. Yes, there is an argument that to really stretch the muscles of that CPU and justify, you need enough bays to saturate and have the ground to work with. But at the same time, the idea that in some devices the best CPU I can get on a 4-bay could be a Pentium, when the same series, and you know which one I'm on about, can give me an i7 or an i9. I can only get it if I max out the system and memory. Yes, I understand their businesses and they don't want to list 30 different SKUs, but at the same time that can be really annoying for me when CPU choices in NASes somehow manage to be both broad and rigid and limited at the same time. Which leads me to my last point about security. Again, this is borderline an unsolvable problem, but it is still something I don't like about NAS, and something I've heard from other users that want to invest in NAS, and that is security management doesn't really find a line. What I mean by that is, not only are NASes, when you set them up for remote access, you are told 7 days in 7 ways that you need to secure it. You need to secure it. Don't muck around with your ports. Keep the walls up. Get your firewall up. Do nothing. Install nothing. And you do that. All of that is said to you. And at the same time, the system doesn't do a great job of telling you how to configure things if and when you do need to configure them. And then at the same time, these are advertised as systems often to home users, to relative novice users. And again, all the brands have done this, but network management is really difficult to simplify. It just simply is. It's not the same as putting a key in the door and actually configuring a lock and all the little teeth on your key. It's just not the same. And the same goes when NAS brands say, well, you can use our online services portal, you can connect via our third party, and again, all our first party cloud access point there, which is an encrypted tunnel. All the NAS brands arrive with that. But I don't think a lot of them speak loudly enough about the performance dip that gives you. And as good as that is, you really do get a performance throttle when you go through those. Yes, you can use third-party ones. We talked about Tailscale and stuff like that. But I just don't think the portrayal of remote access on NAS is relayed to end users in a clear and honest enough fashion. I don't think it's dishonest. I think the way it's being shown doesn't show the whole picture a lot of the time. For example, when it comes to the importance of firmware updates on your NAS, staying on top of security patches and security firmware updates on your NAS is enormously important if you're going to enable remote access. And when you're setting up a NAS, you are given a choice on all of them whether you want updates to be automated. Do you want all updates? Do you just want necessary updates, or do you want to know about them and choose when you want to install them? And that's fair and well. But I think for some users, there should be a door that says, I'm a novice, I'm intermediate, I'm a professional. And if I click the novice door, that system will install and update all security fixes for me. It won't ask me, it will just install them. Yes, it could lead to periodic restarts there, and perhaps there is something that would have to be done there, hence why this is a non-perfect solution. But novice users that have been hit in the last 10 years, different users by different ways that have been hit by security vulnerabilities, all too often those security vulnerabilities come down to someone getting a NAS solution, setting it up, allowing access, and not installing those security firmware updates. Not all of them, certainly not, but definitely there is a good percentage of users that have been hit in that fashion, and they were just not aware of the importance of those security firmware updates. Even if it means that certain apps and services have to stop working, or at least say you cannot proceed further with this until you install the latest update. Other areas of consumer software and hardware in the market, everything down to home consoles that forbid you to use online services until you install necessary updates. I think that could, be extended to these platforms as a choice when you're setting the device up. The same goes with when you're setting up a NAS for the first time. A lot of users who I've spoken to over the years, people that have, I've provided assistance to, and then a few years later, they've been looking at upgrading and expanding their system. They were just wholly unaware that all of the NAS brands have security advisory pages that allow you to see the latest vulnerabilities that have been discovered in these software platforms and how the brand is responding. I get that brands would be slightly resistant to shout very loudly about these. It makes sense because it's part and parcel of software development for vulnerabilities to kind of get discovered, because when you release a bit of software, you're never going to be able to perform public testing on the same scale as actual consumer and commercial use. And in that time, vulnerabilities can be found, or you release an update, it gets attacked by, hackers, you release an update and hackers, and all of this is built on Linux for the most part anyway. So a lot of it always comes down to inherent vulnerabilities in Linux. But still, nonetheless, the security management of NASes, even if this is completely unsolvable, is something that I think really annoys me from time to time when we are encountering how you set up your NAS securely for the first time. And it's something I don't think any one brand, and I include, by the way, open source, again, your TrueNAS, your Unraid, with regards to setting up your remote access adequately and completely securely, both the risks that are inherent, the firmware updates, and how much responsibility is on the end user compared with the NAS brand as well throughout. But this has been 5 things I love about NAS and 5 things that properly wind me up about NAS. I hope you found this video helpful. I know it's kind of a silly throwaway Valentine's Day video, but I hope some of you guys have got, if not similar thoughts to this, or maybe you would like to share the things that you love or hate about NAS in the comments below. Maybe we'll do a video next year. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a great week, and I'll see you next time.